You are listening to the New Book of Daniel podcast. Hello and welcome to the New Book of Daniel podcast. My name is Daniel Bobinski and I will be your host on this adventure, the 19th of November, the year 2020. My topic today has to do with the baloney that we're dealing with across the world with these stupid lockdowns and face covering mandates. This morning, I woke up and saw an article in the New York Post. A Connecticut mom was charged with shooting her kids because she was depressed about COVID-19 and all the lockdown stuff and all the restrictions. She murdered her 15-year-old daughter and critically wounded her 7-year-old son. There's an article over at the Federalist, 200,000 fatalities from the lockdowns that saved maybe 50,000 people from death from COVID-19. They're talking about increased depression and mental illness, increase in suicides, delays in preventative medical care, including cancer deaths and postponed other vaccinations, drug use, opioid abuse, domestic violence, child abuse, increased cardiovascular disease, stroke, reduced average lifespan. This is not what Fauci was thinking of. The guy's myopic. He's got laser vision, dollar signs in his eyes because he is on the Leadership Advisory Council for the Decade of Vaccines under the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And if you doubt me, let your fingers do a little research. Just type up Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Decade of Vaccines. I pretty much guarantee the very first page you'll find, if you open it up, you will see Anthony Fauci's name about 1/3 of the way down, listed among the leaders on the advisory team for that decade of vaccines. This guy is financially invested in getting us vaccines. He wants to lock everything down, cause as much pain in this world as possible, but lo and behold, when you take that vaccine, all of a sudden life will be good again. And he's going to get lots of money. Of course, they're going to say it's free vaccines. Well, it's free to you, maybe, but guess who's paying for it? U.S. government. Guess who pays the U.S. government? You do, with your tax dollars. These free flu shots. I see the sign over at the grocery store. Free flu shots. It's not free flu shots. It's free to you. The government's paying for it, and we're paying the government. So it's our money. And if you think lockdowns are effective for even saving one life, let's take a look at what happened in the military who decided to test this. They approached a whole bunch of recruits and said, okay, we're going to do this little test. We're going to put part of you in this study where you get to be tested and super controlled as far as trying to contain the virus spread. And the rest of you guys are going to go through boot camp kind of normal, right? So you know what they did? Listen to this. They had 1,848 recruits participate in a study, and 1,554 did not participate in the study. So figure 1,850 to 1,550. And let me tell you what they went through. All recruits in the study, the super control study, wore double layered cloths at all times, indoors and outdoors, except when sleeping or eating. They practiced social distancing of at least 6 feet. They were not allowed to leave campus. They did not have access to personal electronics or anything that might contribute to surface transmission. They routinely washed their hands. This is boot camp. You got extra guys watching them to make sure they're doing all this stuff. They slept, instead of 80 guys in a room, they slept in double occupancy rooms that had sinks. They ate in shared dining facilities and used shared bathrooms. But all recruits cleaned their rooms daily and sanitized bathrooms after every use with bleach wipes. Not just your little old cheap wipes, but bleach wipes. And then they ate pre-plated meals in the dining hall. They weren't even allowed to walk down the mess hall with their tray. Here's your pre-plated meal. Here's your bowl. Here's your food. And then after they ate, everything was cleaned with bleach. After every platoon ate, everything was cleaned with bleach. Then the next platoon came in to eat. This is super controlled. Everything was monitored. All their exercises were monitored. All movement supervised in a unidirectional flow so that nobody could go back and forth. It was always one direction, so to avoid contact and spread, right? All recruits, regardless of their participation in the study, had daily temperature and symptom screening. 6 instructors were assigned to each platoon. That's unheard of. 6 instructors. And they worked in 8-hour shifts to enforce the quarantine measures. When I went through boot camp, gosh, that didn't happen. No way. We were left alone in the barracks all the time. These guys were under constant supervision. If they had any sign or symptom, it was immediately reported. They had to go to sick call. They underwent a rapid PCR test, and they were placed in isolation until the results of the test came back. That's pretty controlled. That's pretty strict. Instructors themselves were restricted to campus, and they had to wear masks, and they had to eat pre-plated meals, and they had to undergo daily temperature checks. And anytime there was a positive case diagnosed in their platoon, then the instructors also had to go through a rapid PCR test. And if the test was positive, then that instructor was removed and somebody else was brought in. The recruits and the instructors were prohibited from interacting with any support staff, such as janitorial or food service personnel. And then after each class was completed, a deep cleaning of bleach on all surfaces was performed in all bathrooms, all showers, all bedrooms, all hallways, all dormitories, and remained unoccupied for at least 72 hours before the next platoon came in. This is Marine basic training on steroids. Would you like to know what happened? There's 1,850 recruits in the study, 1,848 recruits in the study. 51 of them came down with COVID, 2.8%. After all of that, 2.8% came down with COVID. What about the non-study group, the guys that didn't have all that bleach and controlled directional flow and pre-plated meals and all that stuff? What about them? 1,554 recruits there. 26 came down with COVID, or 1.7%. Compare those numbers again. 2.8% of those who were under strict lockdown with strict bleaching, 2.8% came down with COVID. And 1.7 of the non-bleaching, regular old boot camp guys, those guys, 1.7%. I think that's a fair chunk of evidence that says masks and social distancing and all this lockdown crap is BS, does not work. In fact, 2.8% is a whole lot more than 1.7%. In fact, you're 60% more likely to get COVID if you're in lockdown. What kind of noise is that? So this was kind of fun. There was a study back east that these guys had observed the spread of coronavirus in certain counties that had mandatory masks. And they saw that the number of COVID infections went down. And my wife was telling me about this because she tweeted about it. And they had masks mandated. And so they wrote a paper that said masks work. Well, then lo and behold, even with mask mandates in place, the COVID spread got worse. People started catching COVID, even though it was heavily enforced mask mandate. So what did these guys do? They retracted their paper. They said, oops, we're wrong. Masks are not preventing the spread of COVID. And so they created a paper that says, we retract that. And here's why. So my wife posted their retraction. Wouldn't you know, what did Facebook do? Facebook marked their retraction as false information. What kind of noise is this? We are being gaslighted, and I'm just going to stop saying the word gaslighted. We're being lied to, out and out lied to, so that we can become sheep under the control of the medical establishment, the global medical conglomerate, or the medical industrial complex. You call it what it is. But that's what we're dealing with, is people who are trying to push this stuff down our throats and make us all afraid because they want to sell us a vaccine. Oh, it'll be free to you, but the government's going to pay for it, and they're just looking at the dollar signs. That's it. And like Dr. Scott Atlas says, he's the guy who basically replaced Anthony Fauci as Trump's advisor on COVID. He says this is only going to stop when we stop playing their game, when we say no more. You've got to realize that they're going to keep pushing until we push back. That doesn't mean we have to be aggressive. We just have to say, no, I'm not playing. It's like I was telling my wife and and my other friends that say, you know what, we're not playing the mask game. And if they want to cite me, go ahead, cite me. If they want to throw me in jail, I'm actually okay with it. No, I don't want to go to jail, but I will, because that gives me the opportunity to file a lawsuit and take all of this evidence into discovery in a lawsuit. And I can stand boldly and confidently before any court and say, look at this evidence. Because right now, when I listen in on the Central District Health meetings and listen to the quote evidence that's provided to them about the efficacy of masks, it's anecdotal stories. There are no studies that these guys are quoting. It's just stories. And they're making decisions on whether we should wear a mask on emotional impulse. That's it. I am tired of this. The more people who will stand up and say, enough, not playing, yep, throw me in jail for a few nights, but we're going to file a lawsuit after that, and we're going to have discovery, and we're going to take a look at the evidence, and the courts are going to play out. That's what it has to come to. That's what it has to come to. But I'm tired of having the government and these little petty agencies lie to us and having our lives constrained unnecessarily and unconstitutionally. Now, people will say, hey, Daniel, we really do have a spike in cases of COVID. Yeah, when you're testing a whole lot more people, you're going to get a spike in cases. What they're not telling you is that these tests are designed so there's no false negatives. They don't care about false positives, but they do care about false negatives. And that's the way it should be. But when you have false positives, you got people walking around who don't have any symptoms, and we say, oh, he's got COVID, but he doesn't have COVID. We've got a false positive going on there. Well, but Daniel, we do have people increased sickness in our hospitals. Hey, guess what? It's cold and flu season right now. And I don't know if you've noticed, but the CDC came out and said they aren't even collecting data this year on flu. They have lumped flu cases and influenza-like illness and COVID, flu, ILI, and COVID all into one big category. So people who are, quote unquote, catching the flu, my guess, they're being reported as COVID cases. Unfortunately, people aren't doing the research, and that's being sold to us. We're being lied to and lied to and lied to. We need to stand up, people. We need to stand up and just say no. That's it for today. My name is Daniel Bobinski. If you'd like to get a hold of me, you can send an email to newbookofdaniel@outlook.com. Follow me on Parler, because I'm getting tired of Facebook, getting a little tired of Twitter too. You can follow me on Parler. It's just New Book of Daniel. And if you want to read my stuff, you can go over to uncoverdc.com and Red State and do searches for my name, and I'll pop up over there. Of course, if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on YouTube, you can click that red subscribe button. We appreciate that. And click that little bell, then you get notified when we put up new shows. So this is Daniel Bobinski. You've been listening to the New Book of Daniel podcast. Thank you very much for listening. I'll catch you on the next show. Until next time, be blessed.